The 1930s were very kind to Hollywood blockbuster star Barbara Trenton, who was known for her musicals and romance dramas. Unfortunately, it's 1959, weeks away from a new decade, and no one wants to see her twist on the dance floor or in a man's arms anymore. Confronted with the idea of living in a world with jukeboxes, rock and roll, and JFK, she retreats into her screening room and embraces her delusions of living in the past through her 16mm projector. With her fame and youth fleeting, she relies on the one thing she's got left, her insanity. Because insulting a studio executive for a job didn't go over that well. We take a look at this Twilight episode, written by Rod Serling and directed by Mitchell Leisen. As always, the alternative theories mentioned within may cause anxiety, rage, and disbelief, but that's why you're here, I hope. And kindly consider leaving a like, share, or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Barbara Trenton would have appreciated it. Now, let's all pay tribute at the 16mm shrine. Barbara Trenton is a recluse, a pretty famous recluse who relives the glory years, known as the 1930s, every day, 24 hours, 7 days a week. She lives a solitary life with her housekeeper, Sally, to bring her tea, snacks, and smokes, and gets an occasional visit from her agent, Danny, who seems to give weather bulletins rather than acting gigs for the past 20 years. Miss Trenton likes her room. The projector is more than a piece of history, but a piece of her soul. Danny tries to shake her out of it and back into acting. He sets her up with Marty Saul, a studio executive, for a part that could bring her back into the spotlight. But Barbara soon learns it's a small bit part, playing a mom, and she doesn't play mother.
I never have, and I won't start now. I also don't take bit roles.
Burning bridges.
You're just an aging broad with a scrapbook. We can set it up through the community chest because it'll be charity.
She retreats home and digs deep into her delusions at the behest of her agent. Angry or bitter, Barbara explains she wants to be left behind, letting the modern world go on without her. She announces her home is a safe place. It's the 1930s all over again, where her dreams will come true, and she will have a party for all her co-stars. Danny is indignant, tells Barbara many of her friends have either retired, forgotten, or just plain dead. That's no concern to Barbara, for the outside world is dead to her as well. However, Danny has a plan. He wants to cheer Barbara up with a visit from an acting friend, Jerry Herndon. This excites Barbara, almost makes her a new person as she's light on her feet, her head in the clouds. But Barbara discovers Jerry Herndon is an old man, looks like it, dresses like it, and is empty of fame. His noble work, running grocery stores outside of Chicago, impresses her none. Instead, she rushes to pictures of him hanging on the wall and insists that is the real Jerry Herndon. Jerry may have retired from acting, but he puts his best performance keeping his gentle stature through Barbara's demeaning rant. Depressed by the brutality of aging, Barbara retreats back into her dark room and descends deeper into madness. She turns the projector on and begins to see her ideal reality flickering on screen. She stands to face it, feels her flushed face, and makes her wish. Meanwhile, Sally brings her snacks and wants to come inside. She looks around for her boss, her eyes darting through the darkness, until she gazes upon the screen and releases a horrifying scream. Danny returns after Sally calls for his help. He heads straight to the projector room after hearing Barbara seem to vanish from the house. But Sally gestures to the screen. Danny bravely turns on the projector and sees the 16mm film project a new interpretation of reality on screen. Miss Trenton's home is filled with spiritual fog and characters dressed in costume, like they had in Barbara's old films. Danny sees Miss Trenton descend from the staircase, who is having the party she dreamed of, she wished for. Dinner will be served at the pool, but Danny wants her back. He calls out for her. Barbara turns to the camera, kisses him goodbye, and drops her scarf. The film ends, closing the door between two similar but different worlds. Danny steps out into the lobby and sees Barbara's scarf lying on the floor. He comes to terms with her exit and the power of dreams that come true. The first thing to get out in the open for 16mm Shrine is its obvious parallels to the 1950 film Sunset Boulevard. The episode is shorter in length, has fewer characters, and likely a happier ending. Its connections curiously includes the episode's music composer, Franz Waxman, who also composed the music for Sunset Boulevard. You'll read this and other interesting facts in Mark Scott Zickery's Twilight Zone Companion. There is subtext about female talent losing prominence in leading roles as they age, but I think it's more derivative and not a driving theme. There are hints that explains how Barbara Trenton lost her edge, other than her abrasive personality. She rants about what defines as modern in 1959, rock and roll, jukeboxes, and t-shirts, leaving us to believe it's not the musicals nor period piece melodramas. If you choose to see it, there's some subtle nuance why it never mentioned what happened to Barbara's fame. Maybe we're supposed to presume she's aged out. It's part of the culture and it's our place to accept it. I don't think that was the message for a 30-minute episode. Instead, we see Barbara's delusions unable to grow older gracefully. And in all fairness, none of her other co-stars of her time, men or women, continued their careers. Danny explained, they're gone, forgotten, or dead. Then there's Jerry Herndon, who doesn't just represent the passage of time, but the idea of leaving a fantasy world of Hollywood and movie making into the world of business, keeping the people well fed by managing the supply chain. But that means nothing to Barbara. A very interesting attribute for the series' fourth aired episode is how it kept its distance from the supernatural until the end. Up until the final moments, there were no overt clues that something was amiss. There were elements of surrealism as told through the cinematography. I'm speaking specifically how Barbara was captured in the projection early, how the camera zooms into Barbara, giving it a very unnatural feel when she talks about her wishes. And finally, how she goes out of focus when she makes her one last wish. A lot of these were hints, using an equally out-of-date vernacular, telegraphed the ending. What I think makes the episode's use of surrealism so effective is not Barbara Trenton, but the reactions from Sally and Danny. It was creepy how they bought into it, without question or hesitation. It gives one thought that perhaps our grip on reality is just as fragile to lose as another is to gain. Speaking of the cinematography, the episode's use of portals is quite remarkable, and I have spoken about portals in at least one other video. It's a way of looking at reality as it is filtered through some kind of device. At least that's what Setting Up Your Shots, written by Jeremy Vineyard, said. Barbara relives her past watching movies. But it is Danny and Sally who are the ones caught looking into another reality. Catch how the camera cuts from a mid-shot to a medium close-up to a wide shot. Even in Barbara's reality, it follows the model of film. Another cinematic technique is the use of match cuts. Match cuts is an editing technique that connects two different cuts, sometimes from different angles, to make it appear it was a seamless transition. They're not just uncommon, but extremely common. But I ask you to pay attention to the door to the projection room. It is something I didn't notice the first couple times watching. The episode stages its scenes from the front room to the projection room and treated with great relevance, like a 16mm shrine. I'm not just talking about the politeness of knocking before entering, but the deliberate showcasing of the door as a gateway. The camera moves from the life of the front room into the dreary darkness of Barbara's shrine. The match cuts are very careful, very methodical, as a transition into the room shouldn't be taken lightly. Transitions through other doors don't have the same formality. They're very efficient or seamless. But there is one scene where the gateway is open and Danny's processions go unabated. That's in the end when Barbara has left our reality. Finally, let's discuss what happened to Barbara Trenton. Was she immortal, living in her vision of heaven, with friends who were little more than caricatures of the real thing? Did she make her fantasy into a new reality? Perhaps she had trapped herself in a two-dimensional world of emptiness and fakery. Or did she die when the real ended? Whether this was a happy ending is ambiguous and up to the viewer's interpretation of Barbara. Was she a sympathetic protagonist? Do we root for her escape from the fast-paced rock and roll world of 1959? Or was she merely a delusional Hollywood has-been who tripped over her own superpowers mistaken for mental instability? One thing for sure, Barbara Trenton has left Hollywood. Ida Lupino carried the episode. We see in her performance someone who was both famous in her time and someone who was living in her time. With each passing moment, she falls further behind in her own miserable delusions. The episode is sometimes described as predictable. It's obvious by midway Barbara isn't going to find any work, not even a 2-bit part. What I liked about 16mm Shrine is that it had disturbing elements in an episode that wasn't intended to be a psychological horror. Whether it's Barbara Trenton stepping into her own projection or pleading with photographs as if they're more real than the man in front of her. We didn't just see her retreat from the world, but the world leaving her behind, with nowhere to go, so we thought. I don't see this as a happy episode. It would have been too hollow, and I would have given it a lower score. I see it more somber. Barbara took herself out of reality to the only place that would have her, an old projection film at the end of its reel. It's a solid 3 dimensions out of 5. It plays a couple tropes that often go together in Twilight Zone stories. Tag them nostalgia and alternate reality. This is Mr. G of Synergy leaving you with these final words. When watching your home movies from another time in your life, you can choose to step into the past or ahead into the Twilight Zone. Check out other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching.